On a freezing highway in the middle of nowhere, a car slowed to a stop. Its back door opened, and a large German shepherd was shoved out onto the icy asphalt. The dog stumbled, confused, his breath fogging in the cold air as the red taillights vanished into the night. For days he wandered along the road, hungry, trembling, waiting for a family that would never return. But fate had other plans. One quiet evening, a U.S. soldier on his way home from a long deployment pulled over for gas. When he saw the dog lying near the pumps, barely breathing, something deep inside him broke, and a new story began. A story of rescue, redemption, and the miracle that can happen when two lost souls find each other in the storm. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more Hearts of Steel. The night was thick with mist, the kind that swallows headlights whole and turns the highway into a ribbon of ghostly silver stretching into nowhere. Beneath the buzzing neon of an old diner sign, a lone German shepherd trudged along the shoulder of the road, his paws caked in mud and salt. His fur was once a deep sable, but rain and exhaustion had dulled it to a shadow of gray. He was around 5 years old, still powerful, but gaunt from days without food. A long scar ran from his left ear down to his jawline, the memory of a fight he never asked for. His name, long forgotten by the family who left him, was carved in a small tag that had fallen off somewhere between the miles of loneliness. His ribs showed through the fur, but his eyes, amber, intelligent, and heartbreakingly loyal, still searched every passing car, hoping to see the ones who had driven away. He had been abandoned 3 nights ago. The car that carried his world had slowed near the bridge just outside Maple Ridge, Colorado, and a man's voice had barked one last cruel order. "Out! Go on!" Then the door slammed. The red taillights vanished into the storm, leaving the shepherd trembling on the frozen asphalt. Since that moment, he had followed the road as if it might somehow lead him back to forgiveness. Hunger gnawed at his belly, thirst burned in his throat, yet his loyalty, the tragic instinct bred into his bones, kept him moving forward. By the 4th day, his gait faltered. The snow had turned to slush beneath his paws, and every gust of wind pierced his soaked fur like needles. Cars thundered by, spraying dirty water that stung his eyes. No one stopped. A few drivers glanced in their mirrors, then looked away, hearts hardened by routine or indifference. The world had no room for strays on this road. When the shepherd finally stumbled near a small gas station, a forgotten stop with 2 rusted pumps and flickering yellow lights, he could barely stand. He lay down beneath the sign that read, "Redwood Fuel and Coffee." His breathing came in shallow bursts. The smell of gasoline, burnt coffee, and wet earth surrounded him. Somewhere inside the station, a country song hummed through a dusty speaker, and the faint light from the office window spilled across his shivering body. That was when Captain Ryan Cole pulled in. His old Ford pickup rolled to a stop with a groan. Ryan stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, his posture carrying the stiffness of military discipline that never left him, even after 2 years of retirement. He was 38, his face weathered by sun and silence, with dark stubble shadowing his jaw. His eyes, a steel gray color that mirrored the overcast sky, carried a quiet weight, the kind forged in battlefields and sleepless nights. A faded tattoo of an eagle spread across his forearm, half hidden beneath his jacket sleeve. Ryan had served 12 years in the U.S. Special Forces, and though his uniform was long gone, the war had never truly ended inside him. His nights were filled with the echo of gunfire, the guilt of those he couldn't save, and the loneliness of returning to a home that no longer felt like his. As he filled the tank, movement by the pump caught his attention. The dog was watching him, ears low, tail still, body trembling. There was something in those eyes that stopped Ryan cold. It wasn't fear. It was sorrow, mixed with an unspoken plea, a kind of trust so fragile it broke something inside him. He crouched slowly, careful not to startle the animal. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, his voice carrying the calm of someone used to speaking to scared souls. "Where's your family?" The shepherd didn't move. His eyes flicked between Ryan's face and the truck, as if trying to understand whether this man would also leave him behind. Ryan reached into the passenger seat, grabbed a half-eaten protein bar, and placed it gently on the ground. The smell of peanut butter filled the air. The dog hesitated, then crept forward, every muscle tight. He sniffed once, twice, then took a small bite. Ryan smiled faintly. "There you go. Not bad, huh?" A flash of lightning split the horizon. The rain began again, thin needles tapping on metal roofs. Ryan sighed, took off his jacket, and tossed it over the dog's back. "Guess we're both stuck in the storm tonight," he muttered. Inside the gas station, the clerk, a wiry man in his 60s named Ben Holloway, watched through the window. He had seen all kinds of travelers stop by: truckers, drifters, dreamers, and the lost. But something about the soldier and the dog made him pause. Ben had lived in Maple Ridge all his life, his face marked by years of wind and fuel fumes. He'd been a firefighter once, until an explosion had left his right leg half paralyzed. Now he managed this quiet outpost, serving coffee and conversation to whoever needed it. Watching Ryan kneel beside the soaked shepherd, Ben felt a flicker of something old and human. Compassion. He opened the door and called out, "You're going to freeze out there, Captain. Bring that fella inside. I won't have 2 bodies on my porch by morning." Ryan chuckled dryly, standing to lift the dog. The shepherd resisted at first, but then surrendered, resting his head against the man's shoulder. Inside, the station was warm with the smell of old wood and kerosene heaters. Ben handed Ryan a towel and poured hot water into a bowl. "Poor thing's starved," Ben said, shaking his head. "People can be cruel." Ryan nodded silently. As he rubbed the dog dry, he studied the creature's body, scars on his legs, a chipped tooth, fur matted from rain. "He's been through hell," Ryan murmured. The shepherd looked up at him, eyes shining in the dim light. Something passed between them then, a quiet understanding shared only by those who've known abandonment. For a while, the only sound was the rain tapping against the windows. Ben poured 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one for the soldier. "You heading anywhere particular?" he asked. Ryan stared into the cup before answering. "Nowhere that feels like home." Ben nodded, not prying further. Everyone who came down that highway carried ghosts. As the storm grew heavier, Ryan sat near the window, the shepherd's head resting on his boot. The dog had stopped shaking, his breathing slow and steady. Ryan ran his hand gently over the dog's neck and whispered, "You're safe now, buddy. I've got you." But deep down, he wondered if he really believed it. Outside, thunder rolled over the distant hills. Somewhere in the woods beyond the gas station, a faint sound echoed, a thin, trembling cry almost lost beneath the rain. The shepherd's ears twitched. He lifted his head, staring into the darkness, body tense. Ryan noticed it too. "What is it, boy?" he asked quietly. The dog stood, hackles raised, gaze fixed on the tree line. The wind howled, carrying that sound again, faint but unmistakable. Ryan reached for his flashlight. The dog growled softly, then took a step toward the door. The soldier's instincts sharpened like a blade. "You hear it too, huh?" he whispered. He glanced at Ben, who frowned. "Probably a coyote," the old man said, but his voice held uncertainty. Ryan shook his head. "No, that sounded different." He grabbed his jacket, now damp and heavy, and slipped it on. The shepherd was already at the door, muscles coiled with purpose. Outside, the rain had turned to mist again, and the trees swayed like dark silhouettes against the lightning. Ryan switched on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the fog. He looked down at the shepherd. "All right, boy, let's go find out what's calling." The dog barked once, low and steady. Together they stepped into the storm, vanishing into the darkness beyond the gas station lights. The forest beyond the gas station was soaked in mist and silence. Each step Ryan took sank slightly into the damp soil, the flashlight beam slicing through hanging veils of fog. The German shepherd trotted ahead of him, ears pricked, tail low, moving with the careful grace of an animal born to survive in darkness. The faint cry came again, a weak, trembling sound somewhere deeper between the trees. It wasn't the sharp bark of a coyote or the echo of a bird. It was small, fragile, and desperate. Ryan's instincts kicked in. His hand went automatically to where a sidearm would have been during his service, only to find empty air. Old habits from a life that had left scars no one could see. "Stay close," he whispered. The dog paused, glanced back as if understanding, and then led the way forward. They walked for several minutes, following the sound that now came in small bursts. When the trees parted into a small clearing, Ryan stopped. At the center of the clearing, half covered by wet leaves, was a tiny movement. He knelt, brushing away the debris. A small puppy, barely a few weeks old, thin as a twig, with patches of white and caramel fur, was shivering violently. Its eyes, one hazel and one pale blue, blinked weakly in the beam of light. Ryan's chest tightened. "Easy, little one," he murmured. The shepherd stepped forward slowly, lowering its head to sniff the puppy. The small creature whimpered once, then crawled clumsily toward the larger dog, pressing its body against the warmth of its fur. The shepherd froze for a moment, then lay down beside the puppy, curling around it protectively. Ryan watched, struck by the quiet grace of it. "So that's what you heard," he whispered. "You weren't just looking for help. You were answering someone else's cry." A twig snapped behind him. Ryan turned sharply, the flashlight beam catching a figure standing a few meters away. A woman, bundled in a thick brown jacket, holding an old lantern. Her eyes widened as she saw him and the dogs. "You shouldn't be out here," she said, her voice steady but edged with surprise. Ryan straightened slowly. "Neither should you." The woman took a cautious step forward, the lantern lighting her face. She was in her early 30s, tall and slender, with chestnut hair tied back in a messy braid. Her skin was pale from the cold, her nose slightly reddened. There was an air of quiet resilience about her, like someone who had seen enough of hardship to stop fearing it. "Name's Sarah Delaney," she said after a pause. "I live just down the ridge, heard the barking and thought maybe a coyote was stuck in the traps. Guess I was wrong." "Ryan Cole," he replied, lowering his flashlight. "Found them out here. The big one led me to the pup." Sarah crouched beside him, studying the dogs. "Poor things. People dump animals out here all the time. Think nature will take care of it. It never does." Her tone carried a bitterness that came from experience. Ryan noticed her hands, thin, scarred slightly at the knuckles, the hands of someone who worked hard and didn't complain. "You live alone out here?" he asked. She nodded. "Mostly. My husband was a park ranger, died 2 winters ago. Avalanche near Hunter's Peak. Been keeping up the old cabin since then. Helps me forget." She looked at him briefly, her green-gray eyes meeting his steel ones. "What about you, Captain?" He almost smiled at the sound of his rank. "Retired, trying to find something worth staying for." Sarah gave a faint understanding nod. "Aren't we all?" The wind picked up, scattering drops of rain from the branches. The puppy whimpered again. Ryan took off his jacket and wrapped it gently around the small body. The shepherd watched his every move, but didn't interfere. "They need warmth and food," Sarah said, standing up. "My cabin's not far. I've got blankets, maybe some canned soup we can heat. Bring them there." Ryan hesitated a moment, scanning the woods. The storm clouds were thickening. "All right," he said. "Lead the way." They walked through the trees in near silence. The only sounds were the crunch of wet leaves and the faint breathing of the dogs. Sarah's lantern cast long shadows on the trunks, flickering like ghosts of the past. When the path opened, a small log cabin appeared, its roof dusted with frost, smoke curling faintly from the chimney. It was modest but well kept, the kind of place built for survival rather than comfort. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately. The cabin smelled of cedar, herbs, and burning pine wood. Ryan placed the puppy near the hearth, laying his jacket around it. The shepherd lay down close, pressing its body to keep the pup warm. Sarah moved efficiently, lighting a second lamp, pulling down an old wool blanket, filling a pot with water. "You can put your coat by the fire," she said. "No sense freezing twice in one night." Ryan glanced around the room. Photographs lined the mantel. A younger Sarah with a smiling man in ranger uniform, a golden retriever sitting proudly beside a canoe, snow-covered trails and sunlit meadows. "Your husband loved these woods," he said quietly. Sarah's hand stilled for a moment, then she nodded. "He said every lost soul finds its way here eventually." Guess he was right. Ryan sat down on a worn armchair, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Seems like I found mine, too," he said, glancing at the shepherd. The big dog met his gaze, steady, grateful, loyal. It was the kind of look Ryan hadn't seen since his canine partner, Titan, died during a mission years ago. That memory flickered now. The explosion? the smoke, the silence afterward. He felt that same ache rising again, the one he thought he'd buried. Sarah noticed the distant look in his eyes but said nothing. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed him one. "You're good with animals," she said. Ryan smiled faintly. "Used to train them. Military K-9 unit. Lost mine overseas." He paused, the words heavy. "Haven't had the heart to get another since." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding without prying. "Well," she said, "looks like the universe decided otherwise." The puppy stirred, making a small sound. Ryan crouched beside it. "He's strong," he murmured. "Just scared." Sarah knelt next to him. "Scared but alive. That's more than most get out here." She reached out to stroke the puppy's fur. "You should name them. If you keep calling him Boy, he's going to think that's his name." Ryan looked thoughtful, then smiled. "Valor," he said, nodding toward the shepherd. "He's earned it." Sarah smiled softly. "And the little one?" Ryan glanced at the puppy, now sleeping peacefully beside Valor's chest. "Hope," he whispered, "because that's what he found tonight." The fire crackled between them, shadows dancing across the wooden walls. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but inside there was a strange calm, like 2 broken worlds had collided and made something new. Sarah leaned back, sipping her coffee. "The roads will be bad by morning," she said. "You should stay the night. There's a spare room, nothing fancy, but it's warm." Ryan hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks." When Sarah went to prepare the room, he sat quietly, watching Valor's chest rise and fall. The puppy shifted closer, pressing against the bigger dog's warmth. For the first time in years, Ryan felt something more than duty, something like belonging. A sudden knock echoed on the cabin door. Both Ryan and Valor turned sharply. The sound came again, 3 short, deliberate knocks, then silence. Ryan stood slowly, eyes narrowing. "You expecting someone?" he asked, Sarah's face drained of color. "No," she said softly. "No one ever comes here at night." Ryan motioned for her to stay back. The wind rattled the windows as he reached for the door handle. Valor growled low, standing guard. When Ryan pulled the door open, the cold night air rushed in, and what stood on the porch made his heart freeze. The door creaked open under Ryan's steady hand, the cold night air sweeping through the cabin like a whisper from something unseen. Outside, fog twisted across the porch steps, the moon a thin sliver above the black treetops. Sarah stood frozen near the fire, her face pale, her eyes flickering with something between fear and disbelief. Valor, the German shepherd, stood rigid beside Ryan, his fur bristled, a low growl building deep in his chest. Ryan narrowed his gaze into the darkness beyond the porch, his flashlight beam slicing through the mist. A figure stood just beyond its reach, still and silent. "Who's there?" Ryan called out, his voice calm but edged with command, the same tone he'd used on night patrols years ago in the mountains of Afghanistan. The figure didn't answer. After a tense few seconds, the person stepped forward, and the light revealed a young man, barely 20, lean but hardened by labor. His clothes were soaked, his face streaked with mud and rain. His blonde hair clung to his forehead, and his brown eyes carried exhaustion and guilt. "I'm sorry," the stranger said hoarsely. "Didn't mean to scare you." Sarah exhaled shakily. "Caleb? What in God's name are you doing here?" Ryan glanced at her. "You know him?" She nodded, hesitating. "Caleb Walker, neighbor's boy. Works down at the lumberyard. He helps me chop wood sometimes." Caleb took a step closer to the porch, his boots squelching in the wet earth. "I saw your lantern, Miss Sarah. Thought maybe you'd heard it too." "Heard what?" Ryan asked, his tone sharp. Caleb looked at him, then at Valor, who hadn't taken his eyes off the stranger. "The crying," the young man said quietly. "It's been echoing through the woods since sundown. My dog bolted when he heard it. He never came back." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You came here alone looking for him?" Caleb nodded. "Couldn't just sit at home. The woods ain't safe for strays, not since those traps went missing." Sarah frowned. "Traps?" Caleb rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "Hunters from Boulder left a bunch out here weeks ago. Sheriff said they were illegal snares, but no one's come to clear them. I found a fox last week, leg nearly torn off. He swallowed hard. That's why I came. Thought maybe my dog got caught. The words sank into Ryan like ice. He looked down at Valor, whose ears twitched toward the distant tree line, the same forest where he had found the whimpering puppy hours earlier. Sarah, he said quietly, keep the fire burning. We'll check the woods. You're not going out there again, she protested, stepping forward. The ground's slick, and if those traps are still out, but Ryan was already moving. I'll be careful, he said simply. Caleb followed him, pulling up the hood of his wet jacket. Valor leapt down the porch steps, the beam of Ryan's flashlight catching the gleam in the dog's eyes. They pushed deeper into the forest, the air thick with moisture and the faint scent of pine sap. Ryan moved with measured steps, his senses alert. Every rustle and creak seemed amplified. Beside him, Caleb's breathing was fast, uneven, a mix of fear and determination. You always walk into trouble this easily? Ryan asked, not unkindly. Caleb gave a short, nervous laugh. Guess I get it from my old man. He worked search and rescue before he... His voice trailed off. He didn't make it home from a call during the floods 2 years ago. Guess I still think I owe him something. Ryan didn't respond, but his expression softened. He understood that kind of loss too well, the kind that left you chasing ghosts in the dark. The forest grew denser. Valor stopped suddenly, muscles tensed, nose twitching. He gave a low bark and veered left. Ryan followed the dog's line of sight and froze. Half hidden under a cluster of ferns was a crude metal snare, its wire twisted around something small and motionless. Ryan knelt quickly, brushing the leaves aside. It was a raccoon, lifeless, eyes dull. Nearby, a patch of fur clung to another trap, ripped free in a struggle. God, Caleb muttered, turning away. Ryan's voice was low but steady. These traps weren't set by amateurs. Whoever put them here knew exactly where to place them. They moved on, following Valor as he sniffed the ground with growing urgency. The dog suddenly stopped again and barked sharply. Ahead, the flashlight beam caught a glint of metal and a smear of fresh blood on the leaves. Caleb's voice broke. That's... Oh no! A faint whine answered him. They sprinted forward. There, caught in another snare, was a small hound, its front paw mangled, its coat soaked in mud and rain. It trembled but wagged its tail weakly as Caleb dropped to his knees beside it. Buddy! He choked out, tears mixing with the rain. Ryan moved fast, pulling a folding knife from his belt. Hold him steady, he ordered. Caleb obeyed, whispering to the dog as Ryan cut through the wire with careful precision. The trap snapped open, and the hound whimpered as Ryan freed its leg. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining the ground dark. We need to get him back to the cabin, Ryan said. Caleb nodded frantically. Thank you, Save it, Ryan interrupted, lifting the small dog into his arms. Move. They hurried back through the forest, Valor running ahead to clear the way. When the cabin lights finally appeared through the trees, Ryan felt his chest loosen slightly. Sarah was waiting on the porch, her lantern held high. Her expression turned to horror when she saw the wounded animal. Bring him in, she said quickly, ushering them inside. The cabin filled with the scent of blood and wet fur. Ryan laid the hound on a blanket near the fire while Sarah fetched warm water and clean cloth. She worked with quiet focus, her fingers deft but gentle. Caleb sat beside his dog, stroking its head, whispering apologies between sobs. Ryan watched silently. His own hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the surge of old memories. The battlefield, the screams, the helplessness of watching a loyal companion fade away. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. Pressure here, Sarah said, her tone clinical but kind. He'll need stitches soon, but for now, it'll stop the bleeding. She tied a strip of fabric around the hound's leg, tightening it just enough to slow the flow. Caleb looked up at Ryan. If you hadn't come, Ryan shook his head, you'd have done the same. Sarah's gaze shifted between them. Those traps, they're illegal. Someone's still setting them. Ryan nodded grimly. And they're getting closer to your land. A gust of wind rattled the shutters. Valor lifted his head suddenly, ears flicking toward the window. The forest outside seemed to hum with unseen movement. Sarah noticed the dog's posture. What is it? Ryan stood slowly, staring into the glass pane. The firelight flickered against his face, carving deep shadows. "Not sure," he said softly, "but something out there's watching us." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soft whimper of the injured dog. The storm arrived without warning, rolling over Maple Ridge like a furious gray tide. Snow lashed against the windows of Sarah's cabin, and the wind screamed through the trees as if the forest itself were alive. Inside, the fire crackled weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the floor. Ryan sat near the hearth, his broad frame illuminated by the flicker of flames. Valor resting with his head on Ryan's knee, while the puppy, Hope, slept curled in the blanket between them. Caleb dozed in a chair nearby, his wounded hound Buddy breathing softly beside him. Sarah moved quietly around the room, securing shutters, her braid damp from melted snow. "It's coming down faster than I thought," she said, voice steady but low. "We might be snowed in by morning." Ryan looked up from the fire, eyes reflecting the orange glow. "Then we ride it out," he said simply. He had the calm of someone who had faced worse storms. Human ones. Yet beneath that calm, something gnawed at him, the feeling they were not alone. Since the night they had found the traps, Valor had been restless, barking at sounds no one else heard, standing guard at the window as if waiting for something, or someone, to return. Hours passed. The storm thickened. Then, near midnight, the rumble of an engine echoed faintly through the snow. Caleb stirred, frowning. "No one drives in this," he muttered, standing up. Sarah froze mid-step. Ryan motioned for silence. Valor's ears shot up and he growled low. The beam of headlights cut across the snow outside, stopping just beyond the cabin fence. Through the frosted glass, Ryan saw the outline of a white SUV, its shape stark and unnatural against the forest's darkness. Two figures stepped out, a man and a woman, bundled in heavy coats, their faces obscured by scarves and hoods. Even through the snow, something about the way they moved, hurried, deliberate, felt wrong. Ryan rose slowly, every instinct sharpening. "Stay back," he told Sarah. "Keep the dogs close." The man reached the porch first, pounding on the door. "We're looking for our dogs," he shouted. His voice was rough, impatient. "A German shepherd and a puppy. They went missing 3 days ago near the highway." Ryan didn't move. His jaw tightened. "What makes you think they're here?" The woman stepped forward, pulling down her scarf. She was in her late 30s, with thin lips and dark eyes that glinted coldly beneath the porch light. "We saw them on the news," she said. "That soldier. He's got our dogs. They're ours." Sarah's face hardened. "Yours?" she said from behind Ryan. "You mean the ones you dumped in the snow?" The man scowled. He was tall, with a square jaw hidden beneath a few days' stubble, his breath visible in the freezing air. "You don't know what you're talking about, lady," he snapped. "Those animals are registered to us. We've got the papers." Valor suddenly growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. He moved in front of Hope and bared his teeth, every muscle coiled. Ryan placed a steady hand on the dog's neck, but he could feel the tension pulsing like a wire under strain. "You should go," Ryan said coldly. "These dogs aren't yours anymore." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You can't just steal someone's property." Ryan's expression darkened. "You threw away living beings. That's not ownership, that's cruelty." The man took a step forward, but before he could speak, Valor lunged forward, barking sharply. The sound thundered through the small cabin. Ryan held him back with one arm. The couple stumbled back, startled. "Get off my porch," Ryan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm that made the air seem colder. "Now!" Something in his tone made them retreat. The woman grabbed her husband's arm. "We'll be back," she hissed. "You'll regret this." They turned and disappeared into the storm, the SUV's headlights fading into the white blur. Silence returned, heavy and uneasy. Sarah exhaled slowly. "Who were they really?" Ryan shook his head. "We'll find out." He turned to Caleb. "In the morning we go to town. Sheriff needs to see that footage from the highway cameras." The next day, after hours of clearing the road with shovels, Ryan and Caleb managed to reach Maple Ridge's small sheriff's station, a squat building of red brick and steel. Inside, Sheriff Elliot Barnes, a man in his mid-50s with a thick gray mustache and kind but tired eyes, greeted them. He was broad-shouldered, with the kind of steady posture that comes from decades of carrying both authority and empathy. "Captain Cole," he said, shaking Ryan's hand firmly. "Heard about your rescue. Quite a story." Ryan nodded. "We had visitors last night. White SUV, claimed those dogs were theirs." Barnes's expression darkened. "You're not the first to mention that car." He motioned them into his office where a small monitor flickered with grainy footage. "We pulled this from the highway cameras 2 nights ago." On the screen, Ryan watched as a white SUV slowed near the Maple Ridge Bridge. The man got out, dragging a large dog, the shepherd, by the collar. He opened the back door, pushed the dog out, and drove off. Moments later, the woman stepped out, carrying something small wrapped in a blanket. She set it down near the guardrail and hurried back to the car. The video cut out as snow swallowed the image. Caleb swore under his breath. Sarah's voice was tight with anger. "That's them!" Sheriff Barnes nodded grimly. "Already filed the report. They'll be charged under animal cruelty statutes. I'll make sure they don't come near you or the dogs again." Ryan exhaled slowly, relief mixing with disgust. "Appreciate it, Sheriff." Barnes studied him a moment. "You've seen enough of human cruelty, haven't you, Captain?" Ryan's jaw flexed. "More than I care to remember." When they returned to the cabin, the storm had eased, leaving the world covered in white silence. Sarah had prepared stew, and the scent of herbs filled the warm air. Hope was curled by the hearth, tiny paws twitching in sleep. Valor lay nearby, eyes half closed but alert, his ear flicking each time the wind brushed the door. As they ate, Caleb broke the silence. "You think they'll try to come back?" Ryan looked toward the window, where the snow still drifted lazily down. "Maybe," he said quietly. "People like that don't give up easily when they're cornered." Sarah poured him another cup of coffee, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Then they'll find we're not easy to break." Ryan gave a small, tired smile. He leaned back, the crackle of the fire soft behind him. Valor lifted his head and rested it on Ryan's knee once more. Ryan absently stroked the dog's fur, staring into the flames. "We're all survivors here," he said softly. "You, me, these dogs, we've all been left behind at some point, but maybe being lost is what brought us to the right place." The firelight danced in his eyes. Outside, the last of the storm faded into quiet, but far in the woods beyond the ridge, unseen footprints led away from the road, 2 sets of boot prints, half buried by snow, heading back toward the cabin. Morning light filtered through the frost-tipped pines, painting the snow in hues of gold and rose. The storm had passed weeks ago, but its memory still lingered on the horizon like a bruise slowly fading from the sky. Ryan stood on the porch of Sarah's cabin, the cold biting at his breath. He looked down at the 2 dogs playing in the snow. Valor, his strong frame cutting smooth paths across the white ground, and Hope, the small puppy darting after him, clumsy but determined. Their laughter, if dogs could laugh, was the kind that made even the silence of the mountains feel alive again. Sarah stepped outside, her wool coat dusted with flakes, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "You've been out here since dawn," she said softly. "You planning to freeze yourself for a sunrise?" Ryan smiled faintly, the kind that carried more warmth than words. "Just watching them," he replied. "I still can't believe they made it." Sarah followed his gaze to the dogs. "Neither can I. But maybe that's what they do. Survive." Inside, Caleb and Buddy were asleep near the fire, the cabin filled with the smell of coffee and pine resin. The town of Maple Ridge had begun to thaw both literally and figuratively after the storm. The sheriff had closed the case against the couple from the white SUV, who now faced charges for animal cruelty. Their names had vanished from the town's gossip as quickly as the snow melted, replaced by new stories. The soldier who rescued 2 dogs from death, and the widow who opened her cabin to them all. A week later, Sheriff Elliot Barnes came by again, his heavy boots creaking on the porch. He looked the same as always, thick jacket, graying mustache, and that steady gaze that could read a man's soul without saying much. "Captain Cole," he greeted, handing Ryan a few sheets of paper. "Figured you'd want these. Adoption approval forms. Came through faster than I expected." Ryan raised an eyebrow. That was quick. The sheriff chuckled. Let's just say the entire town signed off on it. Even the mayor called me. Guess you've got fans. He leaned on the railing, watching Valor chase a stick through the snow. That dog's something else. Half the folks in town want to shake your hand, the other half want to pet him. Ryan smiled, signing the forms with a slow, careful hand. Then, I guess he's officially home. The sheriff nodded, his tone softening. You've given this town a story it needed, son. Something good to believe in. After Barnes left, Sarah brought out a tray of steaming coffee. So it's official? She asked. Ryan nodded. They're mine now. Valor and Hope. Sarah grinned. Valor and Hope. Sounds like a promise. Ryan's eyes lingered on her for a moment. There was something about the way she stood, steady, kind, but guarded, that mirrored himself. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked suddenly. Sarah shook her saskatoos head. Not anymore. For a while I thought this cabin was a cage. Then I realized it's a shelter. Just depends on who you let inside. Her words stayed with him long after she went back inside. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge, Ryan sat by the fire with the dogs at his feet. He thought about all the places he had been, deserts, cities, nameless borders, and realized none of them had ever felt like home. But here, among these broken souls in quiet woods, something inside him had begun to heal. In the following days, news of the rescue spread beyond Maple Ridge. A local reporter named Maggie Torres, a petite woman with short black hair and a camera that seemed too big for her frame, arrived at the cabin. She had sharp brown eyes and the kind of cheerful persistence that could make even the grumpiest people talk. Captain Cole, I'm doing a story for the Colorado Ledger, she said, extending her hand. People want to hear how a soldier turned a roadside rescue into hope for an entire town. Ryan wasn't fond of interviews, but Sarah nudged him gently. You should, she said. It's not about fame, it's about what comes next. Reluctantly, he agreed. Maggie asked about the night on the highway, the discovery in the woods, and the dogs. She took photos, Valor standing tall beside him, Hope nestled between his boots. One last question, she said, lowering her camera. What made you stop that night? Ryan hesitated. The fire crackled softly beside him. Because I've walked away before, he said finally, and it haunted me. Not this time. The article was published a week later under the title, A Soldier's Second Chance. Donations began arriving from neighboring towns, blankets, food, supplies. Then one morning, Sarah found an envelope slipped under the cabin door. Inside was a note written in careful handwriting, for the ones who can't speak for themselves. It was signed simply, The Children of Maple Ridge Elementary. Tucked inside was a stack of coins and small bills totaling $57. Ryan read it twice before speaking. Guess we just got our first donors. That day, the three of them, Ryan, Sarah, and Caleb, stood in front of the Maple Ridge Town Hall, announcing the creation of the Valor Rescue Fund, a community project to save and shelter abandoned animals across the region. The mayor, a round man with silver hair named Frank Dillard, attended the event wearing his oversized parka and a smile that nearly hid his skepticism. You're giving this town something it's been missing, Captain, he said, shaking Ryan's hand. Heart. Over the next few weeks, volunteers poured in. The lumberyard donated wood for kennels, the diner offered free meals for fundraisers, and the sheriff promised to help track cases of neglect. Even the local church opened its hall for an adoption drive. For the first time in years, Maple Ridge buzzed. With energy, not from gossip or politics, but from kindness. One crisp morning, as the first snow of the new season began to fall, Ryan stepped outside with Valor and Hope. The dogs bounded through the powder like children rediscovering joy. He watched them, smiling, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Sarah joined him on the porch, wrapping a scarf around her neck. They'll never get tired of snow, she said. Neither will I, Ryan replied. Not anymore. Hope tripped over her own paws, tumbling into Valor's side. The big shepherd looked down at her, tail wagging, before nudging her gently upright. Sarah laughed, a sound that carried warmth through the frozen morning. Ryan turned toward her, his eyes soft. Sometimes, he said quietly, The road that leaves you behind is the same one that leads you home." Sarah smiled, eyes glistening in the sunlight. "Then I guess we're finally home." The wind swept through the pines, scattering snowflakes around them. 3 silhouettes, man, woman, and 2 dogs, stood against the golden light of dawn, their shadows stretching long across the snow. For the first time in a long time, the past no longer chased them. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or light from the heavens. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, disguised as a lost dog, a weary soldier, or a kind stranger who decides to stop instead of passing by. In a world that often feels cold and fast, maybe the greatest act of faith is simply to care, to reach out when no one else does. If you believe that every life, no matter how small or forgotten, deserves a second chance, then you've already witnessed a miracle. Because God doesn't always change the storm. Sometimes He changes the hearts that endure it. Let this story remind us that hope can be reborn in the unlikeliest places, at a snowy gas station, inside a lonely cabin, or within a heart that once gave up on love. Share this story if it touched your soul, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Hearts of Steel to keep faith alive through stories that remind us compassion is the quiet language of God. May the Lord bless and protect everyone watching. Wherever you are tonight, may you find warmth, kindness, and the courage to believe again.